The stale air in the clinic felt heavy, thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and wrong. My fingers traced the line of numbers on the printed statement, each digit a tiny, precise blade slicing through the life I thought I knew. It was tucked deep inside his desk, beneath a pile of unrelated paperwork from the practice, innocuous reports, old invoices, things I might have filed away myself 100 times. But this one didn't belong. Not here, not anywhere near us. It was a statement from our own billing department, addressed to him, but listing charges, medical procedures for someone else. A name I didn't recognize at first, just a collection of syllables that meant nothing, then slowly, sickeningly, coalesced into a face, a whisper, a rumor I'd pushed away. And the amount, the sheer impossible figure. Paid in full. Directly from his personal account, yes, but an account I knew was fed by the practice. My family's practice. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about foundations crumbling, about the acid truth dissolving everything you stand on. It's about finding a hidden key under a loose floorboard in the home you built, only to discover it unlocks a vault filled with poison. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is when you hear this. If you've ever had a moment where the ground fell away beneath your feet, tell me about it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me share these pieces of raw, human truth. Life was built on solid ground. That ground was Oakhaven Family Medicine. It wasn't just a building of brick and glass on Main Street. It was the heart of our family, the legacy my grandfather started, that my father expanded, and that I, as administrator, helped run alongside my husband, Mark, the senior partner. He was the skilled surgeon, the steady hand, the face the patients trusted. I was the quiet engine in the back, ensuring the flow, the finances, the complex dance of appointments, billing, and staff. We were a unit, inseparable parts of a well-oiled machine. Our home life mirrored the practice, comfortable, predictable, a quiet hum of shared purpose and routine. Mornings were a blur of coffee and schedules, evenings a settling into shared silence or comfortable chat about the day's cases, the staff, the ever-present challenges of healthcare administration. We had a rhythm, a history, a future mapped out in annual budget meetings and long-term expansion plans. My world was defined by the scent of paper and disinfectant, the quiet click of keyboards, the muted murmur of voices from examination rooms. I knew every staff member's coffee order, every physician's quirks, every corner of the building like the back of my hand. This practice wasn't just my job. It was woven into my DNA, part of my identity as deeply as my family name. My husband was part of that world, seamlessly integrated, respected, admired. We weren't a passionate romance novel. We were a sturdy, reliable structure built on mutual respect, shared goals, and the quiet affection that comes from years of building a life side by side. There were no grand gestures, but there was a deep, unspoken trust. He was my partner, my confidant, the man I built my future with, inside and outside those walls. The first crack was small, almost imperceptible. A discrepancy in the petty cash, easily explained away. A few missed calls, attributed to long hours or poor reception. Little things that felt like static on the line, annoying but not alarming. Then came the late nights that stretched into early mornings, not just for emergencies, but for paperwork or catching up. His explanations were smooth, logical, tied to the demanding nature of the practice. And I accepted them because of course I did. This was our life, our shared burden, our success. Why would I question the man who was building it with me? The man who shared my pillow? But the static grew louder. A faint scent on his clothes that wasn't mine, or the practice's disinfectant. A nervous energy when I asked simple questions about his day. Then came the rumor, a whisper from a junior nurse, quickly dismissed as gossip. People talk in a close-knit environment like a family practice. Especially about the senior partner. I told myself it was jealousy, misunderstanding. I shut it down, protected him. Then the statement. The stark, undeniable proof, not of a dalliance, but of a sustained, serious relationship involving financial entanglement with our practice's services. This wasn't just a secret affair, it was a violation that struck at the core of our shared professional life. A name I'd heard linked to the rumor, now staring back at me from our own billing form, with his account number listed as the payer. The total amount was staggering, not just for a few visits but for significant ongoing treatment. Paid for months. It wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a conscious, deliberate pattern of support. My breath hitched. The quiet hum of the practice outside my husband's office door faded into a distant roar. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from a sudden surge of cold, pure adrenaline. This wasn't just personal betrayal, it was professional misconduct, a violation of the trust placed in him by the family, by the board that oversaw the practice, by me. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using the practice, our shared legacy, to fund his secret life. The initial shock gave way to a hollow ache. It felt like being punched in the gut, the air knocked out of me. I sat there, frozen, the paper a flimsy flag of his treason in my hands.
How long?
How deeply had he woven this second life into the fabric of ours? The name on the statement swam before my eyes. Sarah Jenkins. The nurse's rumor hadn't been gossip, it had been truth. A truth I had actively suppressed. My first instinct, buried deep beneath the shock, was confusion. Why her? Why like this? Why risk everything? I reread the procedures listed, complex, expensive treatments. This wasn't a casual fling. This woman had serious medical needs, and he was footing the bill, using money derived from our work, our practice's income stream. He wasn't just paying for dinners and hotel rooms. He was paying for her health. That level of commitment hidden from me felt like a second, deeper betrayal. It wasn't just about sex. It was about emotional and financial investment in someone else's life, using the very resources we were supposed to be building together. I felt foolish, blind. How had I missed it? The signs were there, weren't they? The distance, the lies, the carefully constructed walls around parts of his life. I had attributed it to stress, to the demands of his job. I had made excuses for him, for us. Now, shame burned alongside the pain. I couldn't confront him immediately. The shock was too profound, the implications too vast. I needed to understand the scope of it, the depth of the lie. I started digging. Quietly, carefully, late at night after he'd gone to bed, or early in the morning before he woke. I accessed the practice's financial records, cross-referencing dates and amounts. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, each layer revealing a more rotten core. The payments to Sarah Jenkins weren't isolated. They were regular, significant, stretching back months, maybe even a year. He had set up a separate personal account, but the transfers into it came directly from the practice's distributions to his partner account. He wasn't using his money. He was using our money earned by the practice, money meant for our shared future, our investments, our security. He was funding a secret life, a secret medical life right under my nose, using the system I helped manage. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't just an affair, it was theft. Theft from me, from the practice, from the family legacy. I tried to talk to him, circling the truth like a wary animal. Things feel distant, Mark. Are you okay? You seem preoccupied. His answers were always evasive, plausible lies wrapped in concern for my well-being, or irritation at my nagging. He'd turn it back on me. You're stressed about the practice, honey. We both are. He built walls with my own anxieties. He was good at it. Too good. The man I thought I knew was a stranger. My early attempts to gently probe, to invite confession, failed spectacularly. He saw my questions not as pleas for honesty, but as accusations, which he expertly deflected with indignation and counter-accusations of my own trust issues or overwork. Are you spying on me? What's this really about? His defensiveness was a shield but also a confirmation. The more I pushed, the more he retreated behind a facade of injured innocence, painting me as the problem, the paranoid wife. This gaslighting was subtle at first, then more pronounced, making me doubt my own intuition, my own sanity. The financial discrepancies became harder to ignore. The funds he was diverting were substantial. It wasn't just a few thousand, it was tens of thousands, potentially more. Money that should have been reinvested in the practice, used for equipment upgrades, or saved for our retirement was vanishing into Sarah Jenkins' medical care. The financial health of the practice wasn't immediately threatened, but this level of outflow, sustained and hidden, was a ticking time bomb. What if her medical needs escalated? What if he continued to divert funds? It wasn't just a moral issue, it was a business crisis brewing.
I became consumed by it.
Sleep offered no escape, filled with fragmented dreams of numbers and names. During the day, I performed my duties on autopilot, my mind a constant swirl of calculations and questions. I started staying late at the practice, poring over old records, trying to track the timeline, the scale of his deception. I felt like a detective in my own life, the subject of the investigation, the man sleeping in the next room. The air in the office, once familiar and comforting, now felt charged with his secrets, with my own fear and anger. I found more emails between him and Sarah, hidden in a buried folder on his work computer. Not overtly romantic, but filled with concern for her health, discussions about appointments, insurance, the logistics of her treatment. It was a picture of a man deeply involved in another woman's life, managing her healthcare crisis while pretending everything was normal at home. One email mentioned her upcoming surgery, a major procedure. The cost was astronomical. My blood ran cold. He was planning to pay for this too, using our money. The depth of his involvement was clearer now. This wasn't a fling. It was a parallel relationship built around her vulnerability and his role as her provider, her savior. And he was using the very institution that defined my life, my family's legacy, to facilitate it. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was a professional and familial sacrilege. He was spitting on everything I held dear. The midpoint shift hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just finding the emails or tracking the money. It was a conversation I overheard between him and another doctor, a casual remark about Sarah's prognosis and managing expectations. He spoke about her with a quiet intensity, a genuine concern that he hadn't shown me about anything significant in months. In that moment, listening to his voice, I understood. He wasn't just covering his tracks. He was living a double life where this woman, Sarah Jenkins, was central, and I was the inconvenience, the cover story, the obstacle. He wasn't coming back. The marriage was over, not because of the affair itself, but because of the scale of the deception, the depth of his emotional investment elsewhere, and his willingness to jeopardize our shared professional life for it. The realization brought a strange kind of clarity, cold and sharp. The pain was still there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a surge of something else, a fierce, protective instinct for the practice, for my family's legacy, for the life I had built within those walls. He had betrayed me, but he had also betrayed the practice, the trust of the board, the staff who relied on their jobs, the patients who relied on their care. He had turned Oakhaven Family Medicine into a tool for his deception. That was unforgivable. My strategy shifted from trying to save the marriage to protecting what he was endangering, the practice. My family's name, my own future. He was using the system against me, against us. I had to use the system against him. The crisis deepened quickly after my realization. He grew bolder, sensing perhaps a shift in me, a new wariness he couldn't penetrate. His gaslighting intensified. He started questioning my work, my decisions at the practice, subtly undermining my authority with staff. It felt like he was trying to isolate me, perhaps anticipating a confrontation. The financial drain continued. I discovered he had taken out a line of credit against his share of the practice's future earnings, funneling that money, I suspected, towards Sarah's escalating medical costs. He was leveraging the practice's stability, putting its financial health at risk for his secret. The situation became suffocating. I couldn't trust him, I couldn't talk to him, and I couldn't ignore the damage he was doing. The pressure built inside me, a constant, low-grade fever of anxiety and resentment. Every interaction with him was a performance, a tightrope walk between maintaining a facade of normalcy and gathering more information. I felt trapped, watching the man I married systematically dismantle our life and threaten the institution I loved, using the very resources I helped manage. The idea of confronting him directly felt pointless. He would lie, deny, manipulate. He would make me out to be the crazy one. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that the board would understand. The board was the key. Composed of my father, my uncle, two longtime family friends who were also partners, and a rotating external advisor, they valued stability, reputation, and financial prudence above all else. An affair was a personal issue. Financial misconduct, leveraging practice assets for personal, hidden debts, especially debts tied to an affair partner receiving services at the practice, that was a different category entirely. That was a threat to the institution itself. My turning point wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, cold, and absolute. I was sitting alone in my office late one night, the glow of the computer screen illuminating spreadsheets and billing statements. I had compiled a damning file. The payment records, the emails, the line of credit details, cross-referenced with Sarah Jenkins' patient file, which, as administrator, I had access to another layer of his risk, his arrogance, his reliance on my management. It wasn't just proof of an affair, it was proof of a calculated, ongoing financial diversion and a fundamental breach of trust and ethical conduct within the framework of the practice. In that quiet room, surrounded by the silent evidence of his deceit, I made my decision. There was no saving the marriage, no reclaiming the past. The only path forward was through the practice. I would use the board, the rules he had broken, the structure he had jeopardized, to protect myself and the legacy. I wouldn't just expose him. I would dismantle his position, his power, his ability to hurt the practice further. I would use his own actions, his own records against him. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. The pain was still there, a deep current, but on the surface was a steely resolve. I would call for a special board meeting, and I would present everything. The special board meeting was scheduled for a Monday morning. The conference room felt too small, the air too thin. My father sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of concern. He knew something was wrong, but not what. My uncle was beside him, arms crossed, wary. The other partners, faces etched with questions, shuffled papers. And Mark. My husband sat opposite me, a picture of calm professionalism, perhaps annoyed at the interruption to his schedule, entirely unaware of the precipice he was on. He looked at me with a flicker of something I couldn't read. Impatience? Mild curiosity? But certainly no fear. That was his mistake. He thought I was just the administrator, the wife who handled the soft parts. He didn't realize I was the one who understood the wiring, the structure, the emergency shut-off protocols. My father called the meeting to order. My voice, when I started, was steady, clinical. I didn't begin with accusations of infidelity. I began with the financials. "Thank you for convening on short notice," I said, placing a binder filled with documents in the center of the table. "I've uncovered some significant financial irregularities that I believe the board needs to address urgently." Mark shifted in his seat, a faint frown appearing. Financial irregularities. That was my domain.
What was I talking about?
He probably expected some minor accounting error, something we could handle internally. I laid out the payments first. Over the past year, there have been substantial payments originating from Dr. Mark Jenkins' partner distributions, specifically directed towards covering the medical expenses of a patient receiving services here at Oakhaven. Silence. Heavy, absolute silence. My father's eyes narrowed. My uncle leaned forward. The other partners exchanged uneasy glances. Mark's face remained blank for a second, then a muscle twitched in his jaw. He still didn't grasp the full picture. "While partners are free to use their distributions as they see fit," I continued, my voice low but carrying in the quiet room, "these payments represent a significant, ongoing diversion of practice funds, indirectly, towards personal expenses that were deliberately concealed. More importantly, they were for the medical care of Ms. Sarah Jenkins." I paused, letting the name hang in the air. Mark's eyes darted to mine, a flicker of something unreadable. Surprise?
Anger? Still no panic.
Not yet. Ms. Jenkins has received extensive treatment at Oakhaven, I stated, pulling out copies of her anonymized patient ledger, dates, services rendered, costs. These payments correspond precisely with the dates and amounts of her treatments. This indicates Dr. Jenkins has been personally funding her medical care using funds drawn from the practice. And what exactly is the problem with a partner using his money to help someone? Mark finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled, a hint of annoyance. He thought this was about charity, perhaps, or a friend in need. He still didn't get it. He thought he could explain it away as personal generosity. The problem, Mark, I said, meeting his gaze directly, the coldness in my voice slicing through the professional tone, is who Ms. Jenkins is and why you felt the need to hide these payments, the scale of which suggests a relationship far beyond simple friendship or charity. The problem is the deception, the financial risk to the practice this level of hidden expenditure represents, especially when coupled with the line of credit you recently took out against your share of future profits, presumably to continue funding this. I produced the document showing the line of credit. Now, a flicker of genuine alarm crossed his face. He hadn't expected me to find that. And I continued, delivering the first part of the blow he never saw coming. The problem is that Ms. Jenkins is the woman you have been having an affair with for the past year, a fact you have gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal, including leveraging practice finances and risking exposure that could damage Oakhaven's reputation.
His composure shattered.
That's a private matter, he blustered, half rising from his chair. You have no right. This stopped being a private matter. I cut him off, my voice rising slightly, gaining power. The moment you started funding your mistress's life with money earned by this practice, the moment you jeopardized our financial stability and our family's legacy. It stopped being private when you broke every ounce of trust, marital and professional.
You didn't just cheat on me, Mark.
You stole from the practice. You violated the principles this institution was founded on. I looked at the board members, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. My father looked devastated, his eyes fixed on his son-in-law. According to Article 7, Section B, Paragraph 4 of the Oakhaven Family Medicine Partnership Agreement, I stated, my voice returning to its clinical precision, reading from a document I had prepared, any partner found to have engaged in conduct, financial or otherwise, that brings significant disrepute upon the practice, poses a material financial risk, or constitutes a breach of professional ethics leading to a loss of patient trust, shall be subject to disciplinary action up to and including mandatory leave or termination of partnership. I laid out the full file, the payment records, the emails implying a relationship without being overly graphic, focusing on the logistics of her care he was managing, the line of credit cross-referenced with her treatment history at their own facility. The fact that she was a patient here and he, a partner here, was using practice funds via his distributions to pay for her treatment here, all while having a secret relationship, created a tangled web of ethical and financial violations within the very structure of the practice. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a conflict of interest, potential misuse of confidential patient information, by him discussing her case with others, and financial impropriety tied directly to Oakhaven's operations. He leveraged his position, his access to funds, and his knowledge of the practice's billing system to facilitate a secret life, I summarized. He exposed the practice to potential financial instability and reputational damage. He didn't just betray me, he betrayed Oakhaven Family Medicine. Mark was pale now, his eyes darting between me, the documents, and the stony faces of the board members. He stammered, trying to deny, to justify, to claim it was simply helping a friend, that the money was his. It was our money, Mark, I said, my voice laced with bitter finality. Earned by this practice, by everyone who works here, by the legacy my grandfather built. And you used it to prop up your lie. Now came the twist, the move he couldn't have predicted. It wasn't just about his conduct. It was about her presence in this equation, receiving services at our practice, paid for by him. Furthermore, I stated, pulling out another document, as administrator, and with the backing of the board's authority to protect the practice's integrity and patient environment, I am exercising a prerogative outlined in the administrative bylaws. I looked directly at the board members, securing their silent, grim assent. Given the unavoidable conflict of interest, the ethical quagmire this situation creates for staff, and the potential for continued disruption, I am officially invoking Article 12, subsection C, paragraph 2 of the Oakhaven Administrative Policy, grounds for restricting patient access. I held up the document. This policy allows the administrator, with board approval in extraordinary circumstances, to restrict or terminate services to a patient whose continued presence or relationship with a partner or staff member poses a direct and material threat to the harmonious operation of the practice, the trust of other patients, or the ethical environment of our facility. Mark stared at me, utterly blindsided. Restricting patient access? To Sarah? He hadn't considered that angle. He thought this was about him, his job, his marriage, not about her access to care. Given that Ms. Jenkins' ongoing treatment at Oakhaven is directly tied to Dr. Jenkins' misconduct, was funded by the misappropriated funds from the practice, and her presence here creates an undeniable conflict of interest and an untenable ethical situation for the staff who are aware of this, I declared, my voice ringing with cold authority. I am formally petitioning the board to support my administrative decision to ban Ms. Sarah Jenkins from receiving further treatment at Oakhaven Family Medicine, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The board members exchanged looks, their faces moving from shock to consideration. This wasn't just about punishing Mark. It was about cleanly excising the source of the complication from the practice itself. It was logical, brutal, and entirely within my power as administrator, provided the board backed me. And I knew they would. Protecting the practice came first. Always. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy.
Do you
second this motion, Robert? He asked my uncle. My uncle nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on Mark.
Ida.
This situation. It's untenable for the practice. The other partners, their faces grim, nodded their agreement one by one. The vote was unanimous. The board supports the administrator's decision, my father announced, his voice flat. Ms. Sarah Jenkins' patient file will be transferred to a facility of her choosing, effective immediately. Our billing department will cease processing any payments related to her care, regardless of source. Dr. Jenkins, in light of this decision and the evidence presented regarding financial impropriety and breach of trust, the board requires you to take an immediate, indefinite leave of absence, pending a full review of your partnership status. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief, then horror. He hadn't just lost his wife, his secret life was exposed, his financial lifeline cut off. He had lost his place in the practice, his identity. And I hadn't just exposed him. I had used my position, my knowledge of the practice's rules, to dismantle his support system within Oakhaven and remove her from the equation entirely, severing his connection to her through the very institution he thought he controlled. He was blindsided, stripped of everything in a single, swift move using the administrative structure he had ignored and underestimated. He made a choked sound, a gasp. His eyes rolled back. He slumped forward in his chair, hitting the table with a thud that rattled the water glasses. He collapsed. Literally collapsed. The immediate aftermath was chaos. My father and uncle rushed to Mark's side. Someone called for medical help, ironically, bringing in the very staff who had been caught in the crossfire of his lies. The meeting dissolved into a scene of crisis management, the professional facade crumbling under the weight of his literal collapse. I stood there, numb, watching the flurry of activity around the man who had been my husband. There was no triumph, no surge of vindication, only a profound, cold emptiness. I had won. I had protected the practice, exposed the lie, and used the system to deliver a consequence he never saw coming. I had taken away the source of his distraction, his secret life, and his position, all in one move. And it felt
desolate.
He was taken to the emergency room, not at Oakhaven, of course. My father and uncle went with him. I stayed behind, supervising the quiet, grim task of securing his office, implementing the ban on Sarah Jenkins services, and beginning the process of damage control and operational restructuring. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of work, explaining the leave of absence to staff without revealing the full, messy truth, assuring patience, navigating the legal and financial fallout of his partnership review. The practice hummed on, wounded but resilient. My family, though reeling from the personal drama, rallied around Oakhaven. We were survivors. The victory felt hollow for a long time. I had saved the practice, yes, but at the cost of my marriage, my perceived stability, and the innocence of the life I thought I had. The scars were deep, but slowly, as I rebuilt, as I poured myself back into Oakhaven, into the work I loved, the emptiness began to fill with a quiet strength. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and hadn't just survived. I had fought back, intelligently, strategically, using the tools at my disposal. I had turned the tables not out of petty revenge, but out of a fierce need to protect what was mine, what was ours, what was right. Mark resigned from the practice.
There was no coming back from that.
Sarah Jenkins transferred her care elsewhere. The ties were severed, cleanly, brutally. I heard little about them afterward. They became ghosts in the periphery of my life, their drama no longer allowed to infect the heart of Oakhaven. The practice is stronger now, paradoxically. The crisis forced us to look at vulnerabilities, to tighten procedures, to reinforce trust. And I am stronger too. I learned that the quiet administrator, the one who manages the details, can wield immense power. I learned that betrayal can destroy, but it can also forge a resilience you never knew you had. The ground beneath my feet isn't the same. It's been broken and reset. But it feels firmer now, earned through struggle and painful truth. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Sometimes just sharing the weight makes it feel lighter. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.